Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you. We are absolutely delighted to have you with us for the second part of the webinar on Care Beyond Institutionalization. I am Sister Niluka Pereira, the coordinator of Catholic Care for Children International. My great pleasure to welcome you to this very important conversation on Care Beyond Institutionalization. For those of you who are new to UISG-Catholic Care for Children International, I would like to tell you briefly what CCCI is all about. CCCI is the most recent initiative of the UISG, started in 2020, that aims to support religious, especially women religious, to read the signs of the times and provide the best care possible for children. So CCCI invites religious work in the care sector to be part of the Catholic Care for Children movement, which strongly believes that children grow best nurtured by the love and care of families. Together, we strive to make family care the globally recognized best practice for meeting the needs of the orphan and vulnerable children. So in our first webinar held last November, we tried to understand why we need to change from providing institutional care to family-based care, giving special focus to the three pillars of Catholic Care for Children movement. Today, we are going to listen to three other speakers who will share with us what it means by continuum of care, care reform, and how we could move from providing institutional care to family-based care. The speakers of today are very special people because all three of them are very much involved in different ways in the process of care reform in the Catholic Care for Children movement. A warm welcome to Dr. Janastic Vikirise, Senior Lecturer in the Department of Social Work and Social Administration, Makerere University, Uganda. Sister Euphrasia Masika, National Program Director of Catholic Care for Children Movement in Uganda. And Sister Delvin Mukwana, Program Manager of Catholic Care for Children Movement, Kenya. We are very privileged to have three of you with us today. So let's begin our program by invoking God's blessings upon us. Let's remind ourselves that we are in God's presence. This is a special moment as we take time to look at our ministries, because so much is falling apart, so much is in movement. Therefore, it is an opportune time to look again at what is really essential and what is now being invited us in light of the calls of our time. What is now being invited of us? Certainly, we are being asked to awaken our religious imagination. Our charisms and the signs of the times give us direction for the answers to our questions of what are we to do and how. Ricardo?
Who can separate us now? Who us now from the love of God. Rien ne nous séparera, rien ne nous séparera, rien ne nous séparera de l'amour de Dieu. Nada nos separará del amor de Dios.
Now I invite Sister Patricia Murray, the Executive Secretary of UISG, to take the floor. Sister Pat is our moderator for today's program. Sister Pat, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sister Naluka. It's my great pleasure to moderate today and to follow on from that beautiful prayer experience. Nothing separates us from the love of God. The CCCI program is a very special program for UISG. We see this as an invitation to us as sisters worldwide to lead and be leaders of care reform. And so today, as Sister Naluka said, we will be hearing from three very special people who are leaders of care reform, which really has started in Africa, which is calling on us to build a worldwide network. I think all of us know we have learned from our past failures, particularly in institutional care, and we are reading the signs of the times and also being aware of the changes that are happening within this sector at a global level. So today I moderate these three excellent speakers. I ask you while you're listening to take notes on what really strikes you so that we can have a rich question and answer session at the end. And just to say, I will be quite firm about time. Because we have three speakers, I will alert them 3 minutes before the end of their appointed time so they can bring the presentation to a conclusion, because I do want us to be able to share at the end. So our first speaker today is Dr. Genestic Twikikirizi, who's a senior lecturer in the Department of Social Work and Social Administration in Makerere University in Uganda. Dr. Genestic holds a PhD in social work and social development, Prior to her teaching and research career, she worked as a child development analyst with Compassion International Uganda. She has researched and published widely in the areas of childcare, child protection, professional social work in Africa, and indigenization of social work, gender, and children's rights. Dr. Genestic provides consultancy services to child-focused organizations to strengthen their work. She has worked closely with the Association of Religious in Uganda in their childcare efforts at reform since 2015. And she's currently co-leading efforts to transition Catholic childcare programs from institutional to community-based care. And since 2017, Dr. Genestic has been supporting Catholic relief services for children in their efforts to strengthen child protection systems in Uganda. So I know that Dr. Genestic will help us to understand what is the continuum of care for children and how it is linked to alternative care. So we welcome your presentation, Dr. Genestic.
Dr. Genestic, you are muted. Can you tell Ricardo?
Yes, thank you very much for that very kind introduction, and I hope I'm clear. I live in a context where internet is not assured, but I'm praying that it will all go well. I'm so happy to be here once again and to meet faces that I know, Sister Pat, glad to meet you again, Sister Niluka and others, and to move forward this conversation. Please allow me to share my screen in a moment and then begin this conversation. As Niluka and Sabat already mentioned, this is a part 2 of a conversation on care beyond institutionalization. And I'm sure that I'm hoping that many of you attended the previous sessions where the rationale for childcare reform and family-based care of children has been explained. And so today's presentation will elaborate the concept of the continuum of care within the alternative care framework and in general childcare reform. The Catholic Care for Children International is committed a continuum of care that prioritizes family-based care, as well as the highest quality of care for children separated from their families. The CCCI Charter signed in 2020 states that if families are in distress, provide support to prevent separation of children. If separation occurs, see that children are reunited with families or placed in permanent family-like settings. If alternative residential care is necessary, ensure care is of the highest quality and shortest duration possible. This commitment is based on international norms as reflected in the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child and the United Nations Guidelines for the Alternative Care of Children. Secondly, it's based on what social science research has taught us in terms of what's best for children, as well as the Bible mandates and the Catholic social teaching regarding the importance of children growing up in families. So the key questions that will be answered in this presentation include the following. What is a continuum of care? what are principles of the continuum of care? What does this continuum of care constitute? What is gatekeeping in the context of a continuum of care or alternative care? And how can we prevent separation of children from families through family strengthening? Care reform. Care reform is being discussed at an international level in a particular sort of context, you know, and this context is emphasizing providing the highest quality of care to children, you know, under our care. And the International Framework for Care Reform suggests 4 key interrelated components or elements. One is to strengthen the capacity of parents and families to care for children based on the fact that family is the best place for children to grow from. And secondly, in family strengthening, to prevent child-family separation, reintegrate children into safe and nurturing families, and provide a continuum of appropriate alternative care options. So when we talk about alternative care, we are talking about the kind of care provided to children without parental care. Strengthening the family to prevent separation is the #1 priority for the care of children. Alternative forms of care are considered when this is absolutely impossible or in the best interest of the child. The range of care options available to care for children that have been deprived of parental care is what is described as the continuum of care. And I hope I'm being very clear there about the relationship between alternative care and the continuum of care. Alternative care is what you provide, you know, to children that have been separated, you know, from their parents or from their families. And this care is provided along a continuum. The options available occur on a continuum beginning from the family. So how do we define the continuum of care? It's simply a depiction of a range of care options in order of priority, emphasizing the importance of family-based care. I came up with a generic illustration to just elaborate more on what I'm talking about the continuum of care. And if you look at your screens, you see that this continuum of care can be broadly categorized into three components, sort of. You have prevention of separation, which really refers to the interventions that you conduct to make sure that children are not separated from their families. But in case separation occurs, then you have another phase, which is emergency response. And then finally, there's long-term family-oriented care. And within these broad categorizations, there are many different options available. The first mandates of government and other stakeholders caring for vulnerable children is to do everything possible to keep children in safe and protective families. And this is considered as preventive in nature in terms of caring for children. Efforts should be focused on preventing family disintegration and separation. You know, other risks such as abandonment of children by teenage mothers or other parents in distress, such as those that have been sexually abused and didn't want to keep the children, should be identified early enough and addressed through community level prevention interventions. But in case of inevitable separation, there are several options that can be considered for emergency response. One is you could look to kinship care, placing children with their next immediate relative kin after assessing issues of safety and and appropriateness. And then next option is short-term foster care with somebody who is not necessarily related to this person, or they could be related, but it's under a foster arrangement, which requires some bit of, law and adequate preparation for this foster carer. But this is also considered emergency because you're just concerned about the safety and the needs of this child as you work on tracing for the birth family and working on reintegration. Another option could be respite or transitional care in an approved home. Along these options, the priority still is, can we trace and try and reintegrate this child to their family? But in case that is not possible, then there are long-term family-oriented care options that you consider. Still, number one should be long-term kinship care, where the child is placed on a long-term basis within the kinship. Our Muslim brothers also have what is called kafala. And I think the difference here between these options and foster care is that these are more contextualized and do not require, elaborate legal procedures. And then if this is not possible, what is next considered is domestic adoption and then inter-country adoption. These two require legal procedures that you have to follow. And inter-country adoption, what I wanted to comment on it, is that both adoption generally is sort of long-term and very difficult to reverse. So it has to be considered very, very carefully and with thorough assessments, because a child who is adopted becomes a permanent member of that family, has equal rights, and it's extremely difficult, to reverse it. And inter-country adoption, why it comes after domestic adoption, is, the risks of trafficking, for example, but most importantly, the challenges involved in monitoring and follow-up by professional social workers to see that everything is going well with this child. And then finally, institutional care, long-term institutional care is presented in this continuum of care as an option of last resort because of the risks and the threats that have been elaborated previously. The Catholic Care for Children has come up, I think with support from GHR, came up with a simplified continuum of care that I wanted to present after presenting the generic one. And as you can see, institutional care is discouraged, and the preferred goal is a safe and loving family. Talking about permanency, but in a family or family-like environment. When considering the continuum of care, there are two core principles that should guide decision-making. Principle number one is the principle of necessity, and principle number two is the principle of suitability. The principle of necessity aims to prevent the need for unnecessary alternative care and promote parental care by asking an important question: is alternative care genuinely needed? If the child does need alternative care, then the principle of suitability and appropriateness comes into play. Suitability asks the question, does the alternative care meet the best interest of the child? And secondly, is it provided in a way that meets minimum quality standards for safety and development of the child? The suitability principle must not be generalized, but should be assessed on a case-by-case basis. The determination of the best interest of the child takes into account the individual child's situation and personal characteristics, and identifies the forms of care that assures stability in the child's life. The appropriateness principle requires that different care options are assessed and that the options selected meet minimum standards and the needs of the child, such as protection and access to basic services, including education and health, as well as the staffing and capacity of caregivers. Priority should be given again to family and community-based solutions, and this is very, very critical for young children under the age of 3. The UN guidelines emphasize the importance of ensuring that all decisions concerning alternative care take full account of the desirability in principle of maintaining the child as close as possible to his or her habitual place of residence in order to facilitate contact and potential reintegration with his or her family and to minimize disruption of his or her educational, cultural, and social life. So in this regard, there are other important points to note or principles to guide your decision-making along this continuum of care. One is stability and permanency. This is related to the risk, for example, if you place a child in foster care, you ask yourself, is there stability? Because there have been so many instances globally where a child moves from one foster parent to another, and there's no permanency. And under those circumstances, the child's mental health and physical health and generally well-being is affected by lack of stability and lack of permanency. Another important consideration is to keep siblings together, extremely important. And then also recognition of formal care and informal care by relatives and others as valuable care options. So we cannot ignore informal care. Again, the guidelines, the global guidelines and our own CCI, protocols consider institutional care as a last resort. There's a concept called gatekeeping in the continuum of care and in alternative care. And I wanted to elaborate a little bit about this concept because it's a very common concept that has been used in care reform and especially in alternative care. Gatekeeping is basically the process of assessing whether alternative care is necessary and appropriate and what form of alternative care is best given an individual child's particular situation. So in simple terms, gatekeeping is taking appropriate decisions at every stage to make sure that children do not enter care unnecessarily, and those that are in care actually can get out appropriately and as suitably as possible. So gatekeeping involves vetting all potential admissions to formal alternative care and not just residential care, and ensuring that all safe and available options for family and community-based care have been considered before placing children in residential care. And 3, it involves placing children in alternative care when it's absolutely necessary. And finally, it involves, in quotation marks, opening gates for children to exit the formal care system. Successful gatekeeping involves several important elements. One is comprehensive assessments, examining the problem and the situation from different dimensions, gathering enough evidence, evaluate progress and outcomes, and assessing the effectiveness of different plans of action for this particular child. Assessment is a critical social work skill, so it's not something that you do casually to just tick off the boxes. Secondly, gatekeeping involves care planning for each at-risk child, be it at prevention or if the child is already within the institution. This is necessary when working with families, again, but also when working with children that are in institutional care. Third is exit and reunification protocols for each child already in residential care. And maybe we shall hear from our sisters, Sister Euphrasia from Uganda, that they had to go through this process where each child in institutional care has a reunification protocol and a case plan as best practice, so that those whose families easily be traced are quickly, taken through the reunification process. In other words, the gate is open for them to go and be reunited with their families. And then this involves reviewing placements that are already in care. Another important element is robust data management systems to support evidence-based decision-making, because we said gatekeeping is about making decisions at every stage and every step of the way. And secondly, gatekeeping involves strengthening community-level child protection systems and structures to prevent child abuse, for example, and to prevent separation of children from their families. Provision of essential services to families to help them take care of children and prevent separation is also part of gatekeeping, because you're making sure that children do not fall out of the cracks. And since we already emphasized prevention of separation at family level, it's important to look at how this happens. How do we do family strengthening? Broadly from practice, family strengthening can occur, at two different levels: at the family level and at the community level. At the family level, you can have targeted interventions for vulnerable families and children, while at the community level, the focus is on provision of services, addressing issues within the community that put children and families at risk, while at the same time strengthening those structures that offer protection to families.
3 minutes remaining, Sister Genesik. Sorry.
Okay, so examples of community level interventions, especially in situations of poverty, could include livelihoods development, provision of formal services, addressing stigma and raising awareness, and etc. While the most important thing at the family level is a robust case management system, where you assess the situation, you identify those at risk, and in a participative way, come up with a specific plan to intervene in this family's situation. It could be, the need could be material, but in other cases, it could be non-material, and all that is needed is counseling and psychosocial support or provision of parenting, programs to strengthen the ability of parents and guardians to take care of the children. And key important principles in family strengthening is, again, the fact that it's not a matter of giving out relief and support, but that you need thorough assessment of the problem to include identification, assessment, care planning, monitoring, and most importantly, knowing that families and children that are being helped have to, at one point, graduate from the program. This requires participation, requires multi-sectoral approaches, and requires working in collaboration with other partners, and also being culturally sensitive and ensuring that your interventions in strengthening the family are sustainable and child-centered. So to conclude, care through birth families is desirable and should be protected and enhanced through ministering to and strengthening families. However, separation from birth families is sometimes inevitable. That's why we talk about alternative care. The alternative care framework spells out a continuum of care that uncompromisingly prioritizes family-based care. The continuum of care is undergirded by certain universal principles that we've looked at and offers different options, but the specific decisions along this continuum can be adapted according to your various contexts. Thank you very much.
Dr. Genestic, can I thank you for a masterful presentation? Several have asked if they may have the slides, and we would be very happy to share them with our participants, because I think all the elements you have outlined there need careful reflection. You know, you gave us the framework for care reform and the range of care options when alternative form of care was needed, all the time stressing that the priority is to reintegrate the child into the family. I loved your focus on the principles. Is it necessary and is it suitable? And again, emphasizing gatekeeping in care reform, which you said beautifully is making decisions at every stage and evaluating those decisions continually. You challenged us to open the gates, to strengthen families through assessment and case management, and looking at the kind of supports that families need, and a wide range depending on the context. So I'm very grateful. It's excellent. I see people here in the chat saying, thank you so much for the input. Excellent presentation, very child-centered. So there's great appreciation. So the slides, excuse me, will be made available. If you have questions for Dr. Genestic, just note them, and we will come back to them at the final in the open forum when we have a question and answer session. So now we move to our second speaker, who is Sister Euphrasia Masika, who will have 15 minutes for her presentation. And she belongs to the Religious Institute of the Daughters of St. Therese of the Child Jesus. Sister Euphrasia is the National Program Director of Catholic Care for Children in Uganda, which is a program under ARU, which is the Association of Religious in Uganda. So she coordinates the work of religious who are sisters and brothers who have the charism of care for vulnerable children in institutions. And with the introduction of care reforms, the focus now is to transition to family or family-like community or community care. So she coordinates and supervises 44 childcare institutions or programs across the country, across Uganda. She holds a master's degree in health services management, a bachelor degree in administration and management from the Uganda Martyrs University. And she has a certificate in child protection. She has 23 years of administrative work, of which 16 years were spent working with the communities in the area of services to vulnerable children. So she will now share with us how the sisters in Uganda have started this journey for care reform and the challenges they faced and how they've overcome them. So we look forward to listening to you, Sister Euphrasia.
Over to you, Sister Niluka. Please, can you share the second slide? Welcome to the presentation of Sister Euphrasia Masika from the Association of the Religious in Uganda, and who is the Director for Catholic Care for Children in Uganda, whose goal is to strengthen religious institutes in the expression of their charisms, with the religious becoming champions of child care reform and improving outcomes for children living outside of family care or are at the verge of separation. And these are orphans and vulnerable children. I thank the organizers for inviting me to be among the guest speakers of the day and to share with you how sisters have responded to care reform in Uganda. The Association of the Religious in Uganda has 117 institutes, of which 17 institutes is directly in line with care for orphans and vulnerable children. And we provide care through 44 child care institutions or programs under the following categories of children. We care for double or single orphaned from 0 to 18 years of age. We care for disabled children, especially those neglected or rejected by their families. We care for physically or mentally challenged children. We care for the visually impaired, the dumb and deaf, and we care for children of imprisoned women. But over time, there were no formal structures to manage the above. Next. And so, the Association of the Religious of Uganda have had to think of a program that will help the sisters to work towards care reforms. And this program is the Catholic Care for Children in Uganda, which was born in 2015 through a conversation that was held between the Secretary General of the Association of the Religious of Uganda by then, by the names of Sister Margaret Kubanze and Kathleen Mahoney from GHR Foundation in USA. And the conversation was about that sisters would become champions of child protection and care reforms in Uganda. The program, which is a sister-led, parism-driven movement that ensures children grow up in safe, loving families. And so why did the sisters had to respond to care reforms in Uganda? The sisters had no alternative, but they had to comply with legal and policy frameworks. In the years from 2012, 2013, up to 2016, there were laws that were enacted in the country and which were urging all caregivers to go de-institutionalization. It was not only national, but also international. So it was a shift in the care of children. Internationally, we have the UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We have the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child. We have the African Charter on Rights and Welfare of the Child. And nationally in Uganda, we have the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda of 1995, Article 34. We have the Children Act that was amended in 2016. We have the National Alternative Care Framework and approved home rules. So all these give policies and guidelines on how those in child care should take care of children and aiming at de-institutionalization. So the sisters had to comply to all this. The second reason why sisters had to respond to care reforms is that in 2015, a baseline study was conducted. And so the sisters was responding to filling the gaps established in this study. Next. And the findings of the baseline study that was made among the sisters revealed, among others, that while the sisters were doing a good job of taking care of the children, but each religious institute was taking care of vulnerable children in its own way, not following the best practices as mentioned in the laws, in the policies. Secondly, sisters were running these child care institutions with minimal standards because they were not being guided by any law. Thirdly, sisters needed adequate knowledge and skills in social work and child protection take care of the vulnerable children. Also, there were minimal response to the emerging legal frameworks in the child protection and safeguarding sector. And lastly, there had been a very sharp increase in the number of orphanages from about 36 to 600 in 20 years. So there were so many orphanages being, created, established everywhere. And hence there was a need for child care reform. So what did the sisters really do in the care reform? What actions did they do? In the first place, I must mention that the features of care reform, which include the laws, policies, guidelines, with regard to deinstitutionalization, were a shock to the sisters. They were not expecting to hear of deinstitutionalization because some residential child care institutions had been in existence for more than 30 years. Some having more than 100 children. So you can imagine, you have been in existence, you have children, you think you are doing good for them, all of a sudden they say take them back to their families. So it was a shock to them. Secondly, there was also fear. The sisters feared that their charism for care of children was being compromised. Why do you take children away from us? This is our charism. And hence an implied resistance. Some sisters, did not take it wholesale. There was a kind of resistance. And so what next? When this kind of resistance showed up, the Association of the Religious in Uganda had to come in. They spearheaded the move towards care reform by doing the following. One, first, they created an office, which is for Catholic care for children in Uganda. This office, the staff would run the program and ensure that sisters comply with the government laws and policies that I mentioned first. So the work of this staff is to make sure that the sisters, comply. Secondly, the Association of the Religious in Uganda entered into partnership with the GHR Foundation for resource support. You will come to learn that is really costly. And so we needed support from international bodies. We are very grateful to GHR that came to support us since 2015 to date. They are still supporting us in the move to care reform. Thirdly, the sisters started by mapping religious institutes whose charisms were in line with the care of children and registered them. Because there were many, so they were particular for those institutes that whose charism were to care for the children. And those that were registered with the association were 7 babies' homes, 8 children's homes, 4 rehabilitation centers, 8 community-based programs, and 17 schools with annex of children with disabilities, visual impairment, dumb, and deaf, giving us a total of 44 child care institutions. Now that we had known the child care institutions, we needed to communicate to them about the care reforms that were at table. And we had to go for the key stakeholders. Those are the superiors general and bishops, because these are the owners of those child care institutions. They are the founders. So the sisters had to communicate to them. They had to invite them for workshops. And this photo shows one of those gatherings where bishops, priests, and superiors generals had to gather, and people like Dr. Genestic and other members had to come and share with them what care reform is all about. And so, having listened to different speakers, they gave us a blessing to go ahead. So when we had a blessing from the owners of the child care institutions, we had to think of a guide. Thus, the sisters participated and facilitated the development of the child protection policy to guide the implementation phase. We needed a reference. And so this is an example of our child protection policy that is guiding us in the implementation phase. Next. In addition, sisters had to embark on rigorous sensitization of the staff. At the child care institutions, we had to go down to each institution, talk to them about the legal framework and its implications on non-compliance, because we had to win their hearts, to the new norm of how do we care for children within the legal framework. After sensitizing the staff at the child care, we had to go into capacity building. For short term, sisters were trained in child protection and safeguarding. You can see some of the administrators, social workers from the child care institutions posing at the headquarters of the Association of the Religious in Uganda after receiving certificates, after being trained in child protection. This was short term, like 2 to 3 weeks kind of training. And then we had to embark on long-term training of sisters. About 86 sisters have been trained in social work, child protection, case management, counseling, physiotherapy, at levels of diploma, bachelor's, and master's degree, because we needed the skills to take care of those children. Another step was to have our institutions obtain certificates of registration, legalizing them to operate, because now we are not working on our own. We are not doing it in our own way, but we are doing it according to the government laws. And so one of the requirements is to have child care institutions legalized to operate, and you have to obtain a certificate of registration. For the first time in life, in history, the sisters moved out. They were able now to interact with government officers from the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development for implementation of care reforms. This is the ministry that is directly responsible for the work to the children. Our sisters were just in their own, but this time now they are moving out to interact with the government officials to learn more on what to do. Time comes now when we have to do deinstitutionalization, to reunify children with families. And one of the steps is first to go and assess. Dr. Genestic mentioned it. You don't simply take the child back home or to the community, but you first go and assess the suitability of that home, of that community. So here is one of the photos where sisters were interacting with the local council chairman, inquiring about a kind of a family where a child was to be reunified. These local people are the ones that keep us coordinated. They know much better because they stay with the family members where we are not. And so we have to involve the local community members because they will keep us coordinated. They will be informing us of what is taking place at a particular home, whether there is violence that is not suitable for a child to be reunified. Next.
Sister, you have 3 more minutes.
Okay, please.
Thank you.
So now this is an act of reunifying. You can see the child in yellow being reunited with the family. Next. Next. When a child is resettled, then you must go back and assess the status and give advice. That is post-resettlement activity. Next. Next. And so all was not on a smooth road. There were several challenges that were encountered. One was fear of the unknown, and so we had to embark on sensitization. Secondly, there was fear of loss of the mission. As I said, sisters feared to lose their charism, but we said we are not losing their charism, but we are caring for children in a new norm according to the signs of the time. And some people were stuck in their minds, thinking the old way is the best. They thought children were well catered for, but we were challenging them, telling them that it's better to have a child go back home because of the many benefits that a child gets from a family. Next. And also donors were stuck. They wanted to find homes while children were at residential and not, taking them back home. So this was also another challenge. And we had to tell them that the cost of taking care of one child is much more than taking care of a child at home, where about 4 children can benefit. And also loss of jobs. Staff thought they are going to lose their jobs. Also, another challenge was transfer of religious staff who have been trained, but mothers were, questioned that if they transfer a nun who has been trained, he should be replaced by another nun, another sister with similar training. Next. A milestone achievement: as years pass by, we are recording a reduction in the number of children from care institutions to living in families. As you see in this graph, we are seeing a very sharp drop from 1,207 to 311. Next. In conclusion, referring to the above slide, we are saying that care reform is possible. However, it is a gradual process, costly in terms of funding for family tracing, assessment, bonding, resettlement, and post-resettlement. This is the reason we, under Catholic Care for Children in Uganda, exist, and we are committed to the goals that 100% of child care institutions become only for emergency and transitory in nature, and that there will be a family for every child. We are all invited to champion the cause of child protection and safeguarding. And I thank you for listening.
Sister Euphrasia, thank you for a wonderful overview of what you and the sisters in Uganda have done in these past 6 years. The process of institutionalization, as you said, was driven in the beginning by legal and policy frameworks, but it's very clear that you began to reassess your ministries in the light of your charisms, and to see that your charisms were asking you also to participate in this change. You were very honest in your presentation because you said it was a shock to the system. It produced fear and resistance, but the key role that your office has played in educating people, in mapping, in developing partnerships, in speaking with the stakeholders, in capacity building, and also in particularly, I think, in capacity building. You've shown a very imaginative way forward. And you have said that you have been helped by a foundation, GHR. So it's clear that we have to look for other partners to help us move, but those partners do exist. So I'm sure people will have questions to ask you at the end. So we're very grateful for a very lively and very informative presentation. Thank you, Sister Euphrasia.
You're welcome.
And then the third and final speaker is Sister Delvin Mukhwana, who again has 15 minutes to present. She's a member of the Daughters of the Heart of Mary. She's the program manager for the Association of Sisterhoods of Kenya, and she's responsible for Catholic care for children in Kenya. She coordinates initiatives in 25 Catholic dioceses of Kenya and supports congregations with the charism of care. And she's supporting them so that they embrace holistic, family and community-based care for children and promoting child protection in order to strengthen families and deinstitutionalize children from charitable care institutions. Sister Delvin has a bachelor's degree in development studies from Catholic University of Eastern Africa, a diploma in social work and community development from Marist International University, and is currently finalizing her thesis in project planning and management from the Catholic University of Eastern Africa. So Sister Delvin is going to share with us what are the strategies being utilized by the religious in Kenya on their journey towards care reform, and how have they achieved their goals. So you're most welcome, Sister Delvin, and we look forward to your presentation. Again, I will alert you 3 minutes before the end of the time, so we have time for questions. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Sister. And good morning, good afternoon, greetings, and Happy New Year to you all. It's with joy and great honor to share with you what the Association of Sisters of Kenya is doing in terms of care reforms. And as all we know, Catholic Care for Children in Kenya program promotes holistic family and community-based care for children. I also wish to thank the organizers of this webinar who are tirelessly ensuring we agents of evangelization are aware of what is happening around the globe when it comes to care and the protection of the minors. And it's because as a family of goodwill, animated with faith, we want to walk this journey together. For us in Kenya, we are lucky because our government is at the forefront promoting care reforms that saw to the closure of some of care institutions that were out for profit making and not caring and protecting children. From the very year no care institution was allowed to renew certificate of registration, that is 2017 to 2021, that's last year. And it's only from last year, that's 2021, the government began to renew certificate of registrations with restrictions in place to ensure that charitable care institutions are temporal and transit centers for children to go back to their families or in alternative care. This has been the stand of the government and a call to all stakeholders in children's services, including all religious who have a charism of care. The Association of Sisters of Kenya Catholic Care for Children in Kenya program was born at a time when a lot of confusion in charitable care institutions, whether to close or to continue offering services to children, was being experienced. In May 2018, our executive team of AOSK met with Kathleen Mahoney and Daniel Loh from GHR Foundation and had a conversation on sisters' charism of care and care reforms. The conversation gave birth to Catholic Care for Children in Kenya, which has seen women religious through their national body AOSK lead the way for care reforms. And this is because many of the congregation have a charism of care. And we talk of 141 Catholic care institutions or charitable care institutions that are founded or run by sisters, priests, and dioceses. For AOSK Catholic Care for Children to achieve its goal of holistic family and community-based care for vulnerable children, we came up with some strategies that are helping us pursue care reforms championed by women religious with the charism of care. One, creating a synergy of care. The Association of Sisters of Care carried out its basic survey to help identify the number of Catholic institutions with care of children, where they are located and the type of vulnerability they were dealing with, and the state of those institutions, whether they were operating within minimum standards of care. The Catholic Care for Children invited all superiors, who included general superiors, provincial superiors, regional superiors, together with like-minded organizations, to present the findings and to plan for the way forward for care reforms within the congregations under the Association of Sisters of Kenya. It was a 2-day workshop that was meant to change the heart and mind of our congregational superiors. And yes, indeed, it did. This was so because without the blessing of superiors, there is nothing that can be done with sisters. This confirms to us that there is no way change can take place if the hearts and minds of people is not converted. Our second strategy, we developed a child protection policy. And it's because this was to support, we got support from GHR Foundation, and who are our funding partners, and who are able to help us develop a child protection policy for the entire association. This was to help us or help sisters operate within legal framework, which had been done by a few congregations by that time. The policy was developed in a way to include all congregations and all affiliated parties to the Association of Sisters of Kenya. This was to help the congregations that had not developed their child protection policy. And so far, 24 congregations were helped to develop their policy by CCK program. These congregations were with charitable care institutions, and imagine they had no legal framework in place. Another strategy that we embarked on was bringing the administrators of Catholic charitable care institutions together. These are sisters who are administrators and social workers at the same time. This saw to the sharing of the challenges, the state or situation of Catholic care institutions, and the way forward towards care reforms as a family or as a movement. And the coming together always serves as a platform for us to enable sharing of fears, challenges, and achievements, and also seeking to mentor one another to promote and realize family and community-based care. There is linking up and discovering other opportunities that exist beyond single institutions to be explored. Our other strategy is training of sisters and communities. From our baseline survey, we found out that some of the sisters were serving as administrators in most of the homes or children orphanages. They were either professionally trained in the field that was not related in any way to care and the protection of the minors. Among them, few were trained as social workers, and majority had not trained in any field of profession, just serving and responding to the charism of care by the virtue of the vow of obedience they live. Looking at the demands of the government and the church, as well as dynamics of the world that calls every stakeholder to embrace care reforms. So far, we have registered 39 sisters for social work at the Catholic University of Eastern Africa, and 24 were trained in integrative psychospiritual counseling. This has helped sisters have a wider perspective of looking at care reforms, skills and knowledge that they acquire through education that builds the competence and the confidence of doing what is acceptable with the wider society of care and the protection of the minors, and the desire that are being generated in sisters and religious men to do more on rescuing and resettling children back to their families or alternative care. It has also helped them to understand their role as agents of evangelization from faith and family apostolates, as well as need to incorporate science and academia to help facilitate and enable promotion of child development in a family environment, which is universal right for all children. We have also trained 20 people comprising of sisters and lay persons as trainers of trainers in different communities. This has helped us reach to people from grassroots by sensitizing them on positive parenting, importance of family and kinship care of the vulnerable minors, as well as to remind people of their responsibility in care and protection of their minors. This is more specifically to help change the mentality of people in the communities to know that whenever a child is identified in the village as a vulnerable child or is violated or abused, the first thing to do is assess the child's situation If there is need a child to be separated from the family or not to be separated. And if it is to be separated from the family, first to explore family and kinship possibility of placement and admitting the child to care institutions to be the last resort when the case is extreme and needs rescue and rehabilitation. With the sensitization forums and training at the grassroots, the Catholic care institutions are influencing the way local administrators deal with cases of children, and families are open to take up their responsibilities in raising up their kids. Our other strategy was sensitization of sisters and the communities. The UISG-CCK felt the need to bring all sisters on board for care reform. This was because all sisters, in one way or another, they serve or come in contact with children. For example, a sister serving as a catechist in any given parish, a sister nurse working in a hospital, a sister teacher working in a school or a dormitory, if it's a boarding school, for instance, or a sister working as an animator of Pontifical Mission or children in the parish or diocese. All these sisters, without having charitable care institutions, they need to be part and parcel of care reforms, because they are the ones who refer these children to be admitted in care institutions, as well as visiting and feeding these children. With that reason, CCK ensures that they are all sensitized on child safeguarding, positive parenting, and legal framework when it comes to children's services. Also, they serve in the communities and they have a responsibility to help the communities and learn the mindset of child institutionalization and instead embrace family and the community-based care. So far, UISG-CCK has reached 3,000 plus people from the communities, including children. Our other strategy is support visit to CCIs or charitable care institutions. The CCK staff have charitable care institution visit as one of their major activities and strategy to win and support the charitable care institutions, transit children and donors. The visit help in creating a rapport with the institutions, understanding where they are in terms of care reforms, to supervise if they are operating within minimum standards of care, if they are registered by the government or have a certificate of registration in that case, or are they renewed, and they are reintegrating children in good time without prolonging the stay of children in the institutions without good reasons. The visits also serve as an opportunity to share and learn with those working in the given institutions, and as well encourage them to embrace holistic family and the community-based care. And at present, we have been
3 minutes left, Sister Del.
Thank you. We have been able to visit 54 out of 141 care institutions persons, and we are still visiting the rest. Another strategy is development of database for charitable care institutions, for promoting best practices in care institutions and assessing progress of reintegration of children from care institutions to families or alternative care. We developed an online database for all institutions under Catholic care where they can have proper documentation of children information. And using government-approved case management tools that we have incorporated in the system to facilitate proper management of children cases from admission to exit. The system also helps the social workers and administrators to prepare individual child care plans to facilitate sustainable reintegration of children, monitoring the progress of reintegration, planning for institution resources, and to mobilize for resources as well. At present, there are 78 out of 141 institutions that are registered and are using the online database for their case management and other important decisions to ensure proper care and the protection of the children. Resource mobilization and donor transitioning. Though it is still at piloting stage, GHR Foundation has facilitated linking us with many actors in care reform, and one of them is Makeba Farm that is now piloting with 2 institutions. And after a successful piloting, we are looking forward to have many others to come on board so that we have sustainable family strengthening, and these will help institutions that are taught and mentored on how to fundraise and transit with donors to support children. Another strategy is we have CCI to CCI support. For support, field supervision, and strengthening proper care and protection of children, we have come up with zoning the institution from the geographical locations, and this is meant to help them come together, discuss their success and challenges, and also to learn from each other the best practice. Networking, this has been our strong pillar in ensuring we seize opportunity from other actors in child care reforms, our first stakeholders being the government, linking up with the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection Department of Alternative Care and Statutory Institutions, which has also seen LSK-CCK participate in developing of child welfare program guidelines for the government. The last, child participation, LSK-CCK understands the importance of child space to participate in any decision concerning them. And that's why we have activities that target children to ensure that they are also sensitized on their rights, more specifically to grow in a family. Some of these activities target children from care institutions to ensure that they also start knowing the institutions are not families, but centers of transitioning. Our conclusion is, with the experience we have had with Catholic charitable care institutions led by sisters with the charism of care, it is very possible to have children grow up in families or family-like environment, because sisters are doing it and we will continue to do it. It is a journey that needs all of us. It needs commitment, love, and passion. It's a worth cause because it's promoting human dignity. Thank you.
Thank you again, Sister Delvin, for another very stimulating and informative presentation. I would just pick out a few points I think are very important. The first one really struck me, which was you have to educate people in order to lead them on the path to change. So you worked with the superiors general and the provincials and the regional superiors. You brought administrators together. You worked with sisters and communities. You worked with staff. So you had a very holistic approach to introducing change, because the management of change is not easy. You've given, again, Sister Euphrasia has, an overview of how you manage the change, both at the level of changing the system, but changing the minds and hearts of people. You have given 10, 11 strategies, 12 strategies that have helped you as a group in AOSK. And I loved your final sentence where you said you work with children so that they become aware of their rights and become aware that institutions are not families, but are places for transitioning. Because one of the mistakes we make, I think, in our institutional settings, we're inclined to say we're a family. That's not true. We are not a family. We can never replace a family. So there are many comments again to you in various languages, saying to you, thank you for a wonderful presentation, asking for the slides and for your text. If the three of you can give Sister Leluca your text and your slide presentations, we will make them available. If you have any questions now, I'm inviting you to put them in the chat. We have 10 minutes for questions. So if you can put any question you have in the chat, we'll ask our presenters to respond. So the three of you must have done an extraordinarily good job. We have no question yet. only comments and congratulations. Here's one. How are foster families selected? Maybe I turn to Dr. Genestic to answer that.
Sorry. Thank you very much for that question. Foster families, actually, it's a process and it has to be very carefully handled. It involves, people usually apply in the system, okay? If you're interested in fostering, you apply to be recruited as a foster parent, and then you're vetted, due diligence is done on you. And once you have been recruited or enrolled on the foster program, then you undergo specific training, for foster, parents. And after that training is when a child can be placed, with you, and with very close monitoring, for a specific period of time before you can pass the test. Yeah, and so what happens usually is that they have a pool of foster parents that have been prepared and trained. You don't do it when there's need, you do it early enough so that when a child needs to be placed with a foster parent, there are those that have been adequately trained. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a comment here that both Sister Euphrasia and Sister Delvin might like to respond to. Somebody said, hard questions were asked and faced, hence the shift and the breakthrough. So would you like to comment on that, either of you or both of you?
Yes, indeed, I'll come first. True, like as I had shared, the first thing we did was to bring the superiors together so that we can talk to them. And as you know, our life is well kind of stipulated in a way that, there's a local superior, there's a regional, provincial to the top and all that. And anything really to happen in any given set of religious kind of life, there is a need of disobedience whereby the decision has to be arrived at from the top. So what we did, we said we have to bring all these people together, and they're the ones whom to digest with us. Really, we have to go forward with them, because if we were to target only the young sisters who are maybe administrators, it will be push and pull. But it wasn't easy, because remember, it was all about charism, and the charism is not something you can change, it's the work of the Holy Spirit. But how do we convince the congregation that right now you don't have to stay with children? You have to let them go to their families and support them from there. It was not easy, but we had to tell them the reality. That remember, even you are not biological mother. Even if you try to love them, you'll never love them like their mothers would do. Or neither maybe an auntie will do. And you'll never give them an identity of their culture. So those hard questions and the hard stuff was to be shared with them. And really, it was that it was hot. Some were like fears and were like, now what are you telling us? Is this what you called us? But at the end of the day, we had agreed, and they saw the fact that true, for sure, we might be mothers, but we are not really mothers. And we can still help these children from where they come from. So that's how we dealt with it. We had just to face it head on. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Sister Euphrasia, I'm going to ask you another question. Somebody has said the work of religious is excellent, but what is the kind of implementation of governments in attending to children and families together with the religious? So could you say something about how the partnership between religious and government was built?
Thank you very much, sister, and someone who posed the question. In my presentation, I mentioned that though we are religious, we don't work in isolation of government policies. And actually, my number one reason why we had to go for care reform was that we had to comply with government policies. Once the government says something, we will not say no. And mind you, we had to invite them, as Sister has mentioned, as much as we invited the superiors generals, the bishops who are the owners, but also we had to invite top officials from the ministry concerned with care reforms to come and talk to our leaders, to come and talk to the owners. So we had to collaborate because we didn't have a way out. That was the way to go. In any case, a study has been done. And so we had to tell the administrators of the homes, the owners of the homes, that other than having these children enjoy part of the economical part of it, you know, they say children are eating well, children are sleeping in good homes, other than where they come from, but we helped them to see the other part of the side of the coin, especially the socio-economic part that children were missing while they were at our child care institutions. So it was a convincing factor that, you know, and it was also being given by the officials from the government themselves. We had to invite them to come and talk to our superiors.
Yeah. Thank you very much. There's a very good question here in with regard to human trafficking. A question asked, and I'll go back to Dr. Genestic for this. Girls that were rescued from human trafficking, what is the transition phase for those girls to be reintegrated given the trauma, or any child that has suffered trauma? You know, what transition period to be institutionalized before being reintegrated?
Thank you very much. And it's a good question, and it's a question that has no definite, you know, response. It really depends on the case that you're dealing with. But I know, for example, an organization in Uganda where those girls or children spend up to 6 months, you know, of, you know, psychosocial support, skilling, you know, preparing the families and the community for, you know, to address trauma, and so that when they are reintegrated, you know, apart from dealing with their own traumas, the trauma is not added by the communities and families. So yes, it can be some substantial number of months, as long as the ultimate goal is to reintegrate them.
Yeah. Thank you very much indeed. Another question here is, the most difficult part of the ministry is resettling of children back to their families. It is difficult to convince the families. So could you please give a few suggestions? So either Sister Delphin or Euphrasia, if you'd like to take that one up.
Yes, indeed, it's very difficult. The reality is it's very difficult. And it depends, as Dr. Genestic has just said, depends with the child situation, the family situation. And remember, one thing is you have to bring all stakeholders on board. The family has to be involved. The child has to be involved. The community has to be involved. The administration, that's the government, has to be involved, from local to whichever, depending on your country, the way the laws are stipulated. And also the sisters who are in the mission or the apostolate of care, like those who have rescued and all that. So it's really a process. It's not an event. And as Doctor said, you don't have a formula that really this can lead to this, but only what you do is you have what we call best practice that you have to do. You have to ensure that principles are followed, like best interest of a child, yeah, the dignity of this child and all that. So you have to ensure that even counseling, for instance, if a child is traumatized and all that, all these things play hand in hand. You can't say that I have a formula ABCD. No, all children are unique. And that's why in case management, the caregivers are always told to have what we call individual child care plan, because each child has his or her own needs. Yeah, so it will not be the same for all children. And that's why you'll find some may be in rescue centers for maybe a week, 1 month, or a year, the rest, some 3 years. So it depends. But you have to follow a procedure that to ensure that everything you do is in the best interest of a child. It's not just a matter of taking this child back home, because you have also to prepare the family. Is the family ready? And somebody asked here, is adoption safe? That's why doctor talked of this vetting. There is a process. There are laws of each and every country when it comes to adoption. There's local adoption, international adoption, and all that. So it's not just you come in an institution and you are given a child and you adopt. No, it's a process. You have to be vetted, you have to be monitored and all that. So if all is really followed, then at least we say we can reach at a place. And it's true, because some cases have been successful, they have been adopted and children are doing well. Why not go for adoption if at all kinship option is not there? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Many of the questions in the chat are referring to specific kind of contexts. And I think you're answering it when you're saying, really, there needs to be a case management for each child and an assessment of the situation. And you have all three of you have stressed this through your presentations. I know we could go on for a long time, but I think your three presentations are pointing us in a very significant direction. You're saying to us that new training is needed for religious who are working in this field. And you've named various areas in terms of social work, counseling, psychospiritual development, case management. There's a lot of training involved because this is a new approach of accompanying both children and families. So in a way, part of my role at UISG is to speak with Superiors General and to outline to them the changes that are happening. This is not an area in which goodwill and having a good heart is enough. This is an area that now requires expertise. And I would be anxious to hear just the final comments of the three panelists as we end today, and before I hand to Sister Naluka. What's the final message you would like to give the participants today? Dr. Genestic, then Sister Euphrasia, and finally Sister Delvin.
Thank you so much, Sister Pat. My final message really is to thank the sisters, the religious, for being open to care reform, because that speaks to commitment and that speaks to facing the challenges, but in the best interest of the child. And also to emphasize, the issue of decision making and evaluating the decisions at every stage along the continuum of care, so that what is selected for this particular child is suitable, is appropriate, and is actually necessary. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sister Patrick, and thank you very much, everyone, for your kind listening and your questions. To me, I must say that, as I concluded, that care reform is possible and that someone must make a start. Because I remember, had not the Secretary General by then in 2015 started the move, I think we wouldn't exist. So don't fear to take a step forward. Don't fear to make a program, and please make sure that you involve every stakeholder. You will not manage if you do it alone. Involve all those that it takes to have children at heart, and that it must be gradual, as we mentioned. It is not a one day, a one take activity, but it is a gradual process and it is possible. Thank you very much for inviting us to be part of this webinar.
For me, I'll say we have to have a conversation. We have to continue having the same conversation. And it's very possible, as I just echo the words of Sister Euphrasia, that it's possible. People have begun it, they are doing it, we are doing it, And we have already started doing it because you are present here on this platform. So we are already moving, we are already doing something. So let's continue to remind each other, and let's have just this conversation, and let's involve everyone. All is possible. Thank you.
There's a comment here that says, congratulations to the church and the religious in Uganda and Kenya. You are inspiring for all of us. With that, I would add, and with the support of professionals and experts like Dr. Genestic and others, we can go on this journey. The UISG, through its Catholic Care for Children International Office, led by Sister Naluka Pereira, is working in other countries to begin this process of care reform. And it is at that level that we offer training and formation for the sisters and the congregations who are involved. And so it's my pleasure to hand you now to Sister Naluka, who will say some final words as we end today. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Sister Pat, for your excellent moderation, as you do always. And thanks to the three speakers, excellent. And you inspired us very well. And we have come almost to the end of part 2 of our program today. We know giving information in 2 webinars may not be sufficient for most of us to learn what continuum of care or care reform is all about. Therefore, CCCI's plan for the future is to organize an online training program for religious who really desire to shift their methodologies from providing institutional care to family-based care. Once we are all set to proceed, we will provide the necessary information through the Superiors General and through our social media. One request from us, we would like to have your feedback on today's webinar. You will be receiving a link on your email with the evaluation form for you to complete and send to us. Your feedback is important for us to enhance our engagement with you. Therefore, kindly fill in the forms and send it to us. A special thank you to the pioneers of the CCC movement, our three speakers, Dr. Genestic, Sister Euphrasia, and Sister Delvin, for your invaluable contribution to this webinar and for inspiring all of us with your expertise and hands-on experiences. We value your commitment in furthering the vision of the CCC movement to have a family for every child. So thanks to all of you for joining with us today. See you all in our future webinars and training programs. Take care. God bless you.
Ricardo, you can open the microphone. Or Claudia, if you have the...
Claudia, you can open the microphone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Great.
Good luck, Dan.
Good luck.
Welcome.
Ciao. Great.
Desde Argentina.
Asante,
Oh,
Lisa.
wow.
Gracias, hermana Pat, también.
Thank you.